Is your LLC or corporation in compliance with Minnesota's corporate farm law? If you are doing business in Minnesota or you own land in Minnesota inside of an LLC or a corporation or a limited partnership, you need to be in compliance with Minnesota's corporate farm law. Watch this video to learn more. Hi, I'm Jason Wagner, the farm lawyer. I work with family farmers every single day to help them pass the farm on to the next generation. Today we're talking about Minnesota's corporate farm law. Minnesota has had a corporate farm law on its books for a number of years, since the 1970s. And although it's called the corporate farm law, it should really be called the anti-corporate farm law. The purpose of this law is to encourage and promote family ownership of farms. It's really a family farm protection law. It was one of the first in the country. There are other states that do have laws like this. Minnesota is one of the first that came out, and it's still on the books and it's still enforced. So what does this mean? Well, we like to use LLCs, corporations in some cases, or partnerships to help us transition farm assets from one generation to the next. For example, we might decide to put livestock and a dairy and the machinery and the equipment, maybe the parlor and other improvements into this LLC. Now we have a vehicle where we can put a buy-sell, give us some terms of what happens if somebody wants out or there's a death or disability or divorce. So we've got some protection built around this. It gives us a little bit of more security. We feel better that now we can transition these assets to the next generation. So we might start with a 10% gift of this LLC to the farming heir. But we also have to keep in mind, we formed this LLC, bingo, Minnesota law says that we have to be in compliance with the corporate farm law in order to use this LLC in the state of Minnesota. The scenario I just described, that's not going to be a problem because, as I said, it's a family farm LLC or limited liability company that qualifies under a corporate farm law. So what do we have to do? Well, our initial filing, we would send off an application to the Minnesota Department of Ag showing any land that's inside the LLC. If we're renting land that's not inside the LLC, we would need to show the owners and their relationship to each other. So are these parents and children, brothers and sisters? What is the family relationship between the owners in the LLC? And as long as they're close enough related to each other, then we meet that requirement. The next requirement is that at least one of the related owners must live on the farm or be actively engaged in farming. This requirement is there because, again, the state does not want people that are just owning land together through an investment LLC qualifying. They want people that are actively engaged in farming using these limited liability vehicles and entities to own farmland or to operate a farm. Now, what is the remedy? Ultimately, the remedy is that the state can force you to divest ownership of the assets in the LLC to hold them individually. There is, of course, no restriction to say that a group of investors could not operate a farm on their own outside of an LLC or own land outside of a corporation or an LLC. But we're saying if you want the protections of owning this land through a limited liability company or have the liability shield of a corporation, then we want you to be a family farm corporation or a family farm LLC. There are other entities that are also regulated under the corporate farm law, such as nonprofits, limited partnerships, general partnerships, limited liability partnerships are not regulated under this corporate farm law. Likewise, revocable trusts are exempt from reporting under the corporate farm law. Now, if that trust becomes irrevocable by its own terms or upon the death of the grantor, it must now qualify on its own terms under the corporate farm law and file an application. This application must be renewed annually. The Minnesota Department of Ag keeps good records and they send these out every year if you've registered in the past to make sure that you file your renewal. The renewal itself is pretty simple. If there haven't been any changes, then you would indicate that and send it back. There's a small fee. It's a $15 fee right now. In our office, we process, dozens of these every year for our clients to help them stay in compliance with the corporate farm law. That's the one side of the coin, is that it's a requirement, but what are the benefits? One of the biggest benefits that I have touched on in a number of my videos is that Minnesota gives farmers a little bit of an extra exemption on the estate tax side. So everybody gets their $3 million exemption. Farmers get another $2 million exemption. One of the requirements of accessing that additional $2 million deduction is that the property must be either not owned by an entity that's subject to the corporate farm law, or if it's owned by an entity subject to the corporate farm law, that entity is in compliance at the point of death. In other words, if you have your farm in an LLC or a corporation and the value of that interest is more than $3 million, it's very important for you to be able to get that $2 million deduction. But if you find out after death that this entity was not actually registered and was not in compliance, you might have missed that opportunity. You have not met all the criteria required under the law in order to be able to deduct that additional $2 million. So for that reason, we always make sure that we're working with our clients to get that report filed if it hasn't been, and to make sure it stays in compliance. I recently met with some clients. We're doing their estate plan. They have some farm LLCs that I did not establish, my firm did not establish. And I asked them if they are in compliance. They had never heard of this. So I go to the Minnesota Department of Ag website, and you can do a search. You can do a lookup of those that have registered. I'm not finding any entity registration for these LLCs. So thankfully, we will be able to get them registered. We'll get it filed. They'll need to get caught up on their compliance. But going forward, now this is not going to be a problem. Now, again, and this is a family farm that there's no reason that they wouldn't meet the requirements. They just haven't actually done the paperwork and filed it with the state. And during the estate plan, when we're talking about their assets and their estate tax exposure, it's a very important time for us to be checking those to make sure that we're latching on to all of the deductions that the state has built in for family farms, and to show the state that, yes, this is a family farm. So if you own land in Minnesota, whether you are a Minnesota resident or not, or you operate a farm in Minnesota, again, whether you're a Minnesota resident or not, and that farm is owned in an LLC, a corporation, a limited partnership, or an irrevocable trust, you need to file a corporate farm report with the state of Minnesota. If you don't do that, you're not in compliance with the law. The ultimate remedy is that the state can force that entity to divest itself of that farm, which may have other liability or tax consequences that you might not want to get into. So stay in compliance. If you have questions on this, check out my website, farmlawyer.com. That links to the law firm. We have a lot of articles on this. You can search corporate farm law. If you want help getting in compliance, or you need help filling out the form, or you want to hire us to just make sure it's done every year for you, check it out and contact us. For more farm law tips, subscribe to my channel or drop a comment below.